Well, welcome to Straight Shooting News. I'm your host, Bandana Red. Tonight's show is going to be Arrest by Algorithm, Megadata, the new big oil, artificial intelligence, and tyranny. Tonight we're going to cover the obvious and the deceptions and the consequences that you all need to pay attention to. So, saying that, we're coming to you from the Merrimack Valley, Massachusetts, where the shot heard around the world was fired. And the way men would rule or not be ruled would be forever changed. No more kings, queens, czars, emperors. It was a new constitution that was going to be born from that shot that was fired, where men could rule themselves. Interesting concept. But like one of our founders, Ben Franklin, said, we'll give you a republic if you can keep it. And it's starting to look each day that's more and more in peril. So what we're going to talk tonight, all the stuff we're going to be using is all under fair use laws. And with that being said, let's talk about something here that needs to be talked about. What we're seeing now is the cannibalization of humanity to technological and even pharmaceutical advances. You know, they're taking control. And the people that are taking control are mentally inferior elements of society that choose to prey on complacency of the unaware. And that's got to be exposed. Everybody's different. There's different people in life. And some people are strong. Some people are weak. And the strong usually stand up and protect the weak. That's a civilized society. There's no problem with that. The problem is the people that are taking control. You know, through the evolution of the human race, there have been like advancements. They're all created basically for what they call the greater good, but instead became a double-edged sword of destruction, particularly when they fall in the wrong hands. And we're in a time in history where a lot of all these advancements that we made have fallen into the wrong hands. So tonight we're going to expose those elements of evil and the mission we must accept to preserve humanity moving forward. See, social media and communications has linked many of us across the globe. But together in many most pleasurable ways, we can all share like our cultures, our thoughts, a sensation of unity, of our species. But simultaneously, there are many are experiencing all these positive aspects. There are those with diabolical intent. And their intent is due to their own insecurities and ambitions. And they're utilizing the same advancements to serve their personal desires of achieving ultimate power and control. So, for example, I got some notes here I want to read to you about some of these evil folks that are deceiving the good people into thinking that they're doing good for mankind. It's basically just serving their own purpose. You got people like the medical, scientifically educated insane, like the madman, Dr. Fauci. He actually believes the human race, all of it, are his personal test subjects for him to experiment on. Well, this insanity, desires evolves from his inferior personal stature, and the lack of confidence. Maybe he's been subjected to a lot of mental or physical abuse early in his life. We don't know. But his inferiority complex became clear. And that's like him putting on that, that, what do you call it, an eminent front when he's out there. He's got his ego going for him, but he's got to be stopped. I mean, you can tell anybody that has any knowledge of the human race, characters. I'm not talking about the people that are learning it in a book in school and then come out and say, I'm a psychologist. Really? You know, crap about life. I'll do a mental battle with you anytime. It'll be like I'm dealing with an unarmed person. You got to go out and experience life before you can start even advising or thinking about talking to people about their issues. So this guy, I mean, these people like him, they need to be stopped and they need to be held accountable, because the whole idea of holding people accountable for when they cross the line of civility of a civil society is the accountability, because you got to discourage others, from doing the same thing they're doing. Then we have the likes of someone like Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum. His ego and ambition is fed by his cult followers. They believe in him, and his minions are just sitting there doing his bidding for him. Well, he's telling them what he thinks is best for the human race. They get financially rewarded, of course, which is always a big ploy in all these people's minds. They use money as a tool and a weapon. I mean, Schwab became a professor of business policy at the University of Geneva, Switzerland, in 1972. Then he began to organize his ambitious attempt to mold the world in his image. And he teamed up with others that had the same ambitions. But basically, I think he crushed them along the way and he moved forward with his own agenda. So his inferiority complex, I think, came from when he was a youth. This was all youth. Everybody as a youth has doubts. It's just part of growing up. But his was fueled by when his father moved his family from Switzerland to Germany to work for Hitler's Third Reich. Once they did that, they all were living under the scrutiny of Hitler's Gestapo. So it is clear that instead of rejecting authoritarianism in favor of freedom, he chose to embrace a tyrannical concept and fully intends to burden the human race through manipulation and all the resources available to achieve his agenda. Dangerous man. Then we have Bill Gates. He's been hailed as the computer genius, a revolutionary in his field, has brought his fame and fortune. Oh, great. But what happened? Now, although his investments have led to a lot of this artificial intelligence and technologies that we're developing today, his awkwardness and other forms of uneasiness as a youth resulted in developing his inferiority complex. That led him to partnering up with both Fauci and Klaus officially in the year 2000. They formed a foundation. At that time, they claimed that the foundation was created for the good of humanity. But that's proven otherwise over time. What's been done to the human race since these three, what would you call them? I call them enemies of the human race. You can find your own term. They've inflicted so much pain and suffering on the human race. It's immeasurable. Through the course of history, they've used all the technology, they use the medical things. I mean, I've gone into detail with so many shows before, so I'm not going to get into it again tonight. But see, our founders And here we go. Let's go right back to this. Our founders understood this. They knew the types of evils like the Faucis, the Schwabs, the Gates. They existed in the world at that time. And they created a document in where freemen everywhere could adopt to defend themselves. They would have the ability against this form of tyranny that we're witnessing today. And they've never had this much power and outreach to implement this kind of tyranny. Our founders could have never envisioned it back then, but they did know it existed. So at that time, they created that document for everybody. And we need to stand by this. Every show I keep putting this up. This is our line of defense. And anybody who goes against this is an enemy of the state, the country. I don't care what they have on them, what they're wearing, what they're carrying, what they perceive they may be doing, whether they perceive they're doing right or wrong. Because even in the military, if you disobey the oath you took and follow out an unconstitutional order, that goes against military conduct. People are going to start learning that. That goes for law enforcement of all levels. So, like I said, what they did with our founders is they put the document out, the U.S. Constitution, the U.S. Bill of Rights, and the inalienable rights, so we could protect our freedoms as human beings, not even just citizens of the United States. It's natural law. It's there. And the last checks and balances are in the hands of we the people. And that's why they worded it that way. So it's going to be up to us to protect the freedom. So what we have here is, we're going to get into tonight some concerns and some hidden reality. But first, I made a few notes of just things that we won't be covering much on tonight, but came up during the week and are notable to cover. So what we have is, let's take a look at some of the stuff coming across the newswire. We got the Pelosi. So as far as that goes, we're not going to touch on it too much, but the only reason why we are going to mention it is because, you know, I really don't care what anybody does personally, and as a constitutionalist and probably more of a civil libertarian stance. What you want to do, that's your business. But when they insult the American people's intelligence and try to use it to cast blame on others for Paul's little head trip thing that he does with his folks in San Francisco. I mean, even the thought that, you know, Paul Pelosi owns a hammer. And what was he doing? He had the hammer on hand. I mean, just think about it. This is how much they're insulting your intelligence. I mean, a great wealth like him and Nance have. What are we doing with a hammer? Did he just like paint the living room and he's got to put the curtain rods back up? Yeah, right. All right. But what's more important is what's happening in the Western Hemisphere. Just got the news that came over the wires. The populist president, Bolsonaro from Brazil, lost his bid for re-election to a left-wing candidate. That should leave Americans extremely cautious about thoughts of a red wave coming in the USA. Because in case you haven't been following any of that, Bolsonaro was a very populist president. He was sort of like President Trump. and he was a threat. And the red communist Chinese have been pouring a lot of money into Brazil. They want that. Brazil is probably the last country that could even make a difference in the Western Hemisphere that would stand by the United States of America to protect freedom and the free world. It's a huge country. The people enjoy their freedom, but they're being deceived. Either that, who knows what happened in their election, what kind of vote machines they're using there, and who's buying whose influence. You got a completely left-wing president back in there. There's a lot going on there to think about. We'll probably have more on that in the future. And it appears some European nations, and I think the term I heard was they're cozying up to Russia and China. Stay tuned. Europeans going to get real. Europe's going to get real ugly. I mean, a lot of division, countries go in different directions. No matter how you feel about Russian and Ukraine war, the fact that the team went up with communist China, that makes them a threat, period. I don't really care what anybody has to say about any other issues there. Who's a good guy, who's not a good guy. Communist China is a threat to the world. Like I said, if the United States is the only ones that are going to be able to defend the free world in the Western Hemisphere, you got some problems coming up. Start thinking about your children and grandchildren, what they may have to do to fight for freedom. Or maybe they just cower under and spend the rest of their lives as slaves under communist rule. But most important to most Americans immediately is we have a shortage of diesel fuel on hand in this country. I think they're estimating about 25 days. And I hear reports that they're not producing anymore. I'm not sure. I think some plants are reopening. They were doing a cleanup for a while. But you also need crude to be able to refine into diesel. Without diesel, you have no trucks rolling down the road. That's your food supply, energy supply, heat. Interesting. Wintertime, heat. So I think it's something we need to keep an eye on. And OPEC, I think, has no interest in helping. Stay tuned for that one. Because like I think I just mentioned last week, OPEC, that's how they make their living, with oil. And they also seem to have a problem when Iran, the OPEC nations, and they're a threat. And the U.S., under Biden's leadership, has pretty much siding with Iran. A lot of interesting things happening there too, since they killed the girl from not wearing her burqa. Good luck. I hope you people just keep sitting out there saying, well, we should leave them alone and this and that. Well, you don't leave them alone for so long. We don't even know what's coming over our southern border right now. I think I told you last week. You want to take down the nation, you go after logistics. So you stop pumping oil, stop drilling for oil, become reliant overseas, people who aren't going to help you. You let people coming in over the border, even if most of them are legitimately coming here for a better life, there's that percentage here that we've become reliant on daily functions, which could be happening this winter with the diesel, that we're going to need everything that they're producing to keep the country moving, the country fed, and some of the people heated. I think these people in here to sabotage that. And you got chaos inside the country. Perfect takedown. No one's paying attention. Okay, so with that being said tonight, let's start with the obvious and stuff we're hearing on the news. There's one story that's been flying around the news, a lot of degree of joy for some people and despair of others who are the minions and the stooges of these people who are out for complete control. Elon Musk bought Twitter, and he's changing things. Elon Musk seems to be a First Amendment kind of guy, but Let's see what you have to say. Let's start with this clip and then we'll talk a little more about it. Roll that.
The Babylon Bee is one of the last English language satire sites left on the internet. And no, we're not counting the Daily Beast or the Atlantic magazine, neither of which makes people laugh on purpose. The Babylon Bee, by contrast, is intentionally amusing, and it succeeds, mostly because it is sharp and it's honest. This March, the site published a piece with the headline, "The Babylon Bee's Man of the Year is Rachel Levine." The article was funny because it pointed out that Rachel Levine is himself pretty funny. Here you have a man dressed up like a woman in makeup and purple glasses, wearing some kind of admiral's uniform, pretending to be the Assistant Secretary of Health when he looks like a candidate for an imminent heart attack himself. So the whole outfit is a riot. It's like a Halloween costume some clever drunk college student dreamed up. This year I'm going as an obese transvestite health admiral. You'd laugh if you saw him at a party. But the Biden administration can't allow you to laugh at Rachel Levine or at Karine Jean-Pierre or Kamala Harris or any of the other transparently absurd figures that pretending are running our country. Or for that matter, at Biden himself, who somehow they tell you got, quote, 81 million votes despite being senile and rarely going outside. It's all pretty funny when you think about it, but you can't laugh. And you can't laugh because humor is the most subversive thing. Once you start noticing the pure, hilarious ridiculousness of the people in charge, you may be much less likely to obey them. So it's absolutely vital that somebody wipe that smirk off your face by force if necessary. So Twitter immediately banned the Babylon Bee from its site for the crime of making fun of Rachel Levine. So you've heard that story. You've heard other stories like it. But here's what's interesting about this one. Elon Musk, wherever he was at the time, noticed this happening. And he was appalled. He wasn't appalled because he's an ideological conservative. Musk is the richest man in the world, and he didn't get that way by being a right-wing political activist. He's a business guy. To the extent Musk has politics, they seem to be traditional civil liberties-oriented liberal. But banning a comedy site for mocking someone in power? That seemed totalitarian to Elon Musk. So Musk called the head of the Babylon Bee, Seth Dillon, and told him that he, quote, might need to buy Twitter. And he wasn't kidding. Yesterday, after months of legal drama, Musk did that. "The bird is freed," he tweeted. Then he fired several of the company's top executives, including its CEO, Parag Agrawal. Within hours, he pledged to let people laugh online if they wanted, to let people who've been excluded from our public conversation speak, lifting the bans on the banned commentators on Twitter. That would include presumably Donald Trump, the former president, Project Veritas, a group of journalists, Alex Jones, and many thousands of others. Then Musk promised to make Twitter's algorithm transparent. What is Twitter's algorithm exactly? Well, we don't have any real idea because no one's seen it. We will now. Twitter will no longer be a publicly held company. It'll be a privately held company. And Musk has said he will show us exactly how it works. First right guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. It's our civic religion. It's what America is. Without free speech, it's not America, period.
Folks, the surveillance state, it's getting worse. It's moving full steam ahead. The FBI is reportedly dishing out $27 million to use BabelX. What the hell is BabelX? Well, it's tracking software to spy on your social media posts. The Bureau claims their goal is to identify possible threats and predict where crimes could happen. What could possibly go wrong with that? Joining me now is FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin. Kyle, thanks for spending some time with us again. I appreciate it. What is BabelX, Kyle, and what's the potential for abuse here by the FBI?
Thanks for having me back on, Dan. BabelX is a social media exploitation tool, or what the Bureau calls SOMEX, since they love acronyms so much. And the tool is used to crawl across multiple platforms of social media, and when used properly, it's an appropriate law enforcement tool. It can be used very narrowly, very specific keywords and very specific geographic areas, and so then you end up with a very appropriate tool. But if that is expanded, it has some very questionable constitutional issues that come up, specifically your First Amendment right to free speech and whether the government should be monitoring it.
Yeah, I mean, really, if they're trolling our social media and surveilling our social media for election misinformation, Kyle, it's kind of discretionary what they categorize as misinformation. I mean, they totally missed the Hunter Biden laptop story was actually classified as disinformation, even though it was real. So are rank and file agents worried about the Bureau's kind of marriage to big tech to crack down on misinformation and election crimes? This sounds like this could be real trouble.
Well, the concern is why it's public, obviously. That's why you have whistleblowers coming forward with this kind of information. That's why it's being discussed. When the FBI lists on a list of, 8 different potential election crimes, something like misinformation or disinformation, which are not explicit crimes, they're only really criminal if they are part of one of the other crimes that are listed on that list. So they're just not the thing that is the purview of the FBI. They should be explicitly avoided for First Amendment considerations. So you hit the nail on the head. Rank and file agents, people on the front lines, they're concerned that this could be abused, and it's not going to be abused in every field office. And that's the real story, I think, is that it has potential of being abused only in specific areas where management is willing to sign off on broader searches than is appropriate.
I mean, I got about a minute left, Kyle, but what's to stop, say, an FBI agent who, isn't really concerned about his duty and is more concerned about left-wing politics from just opening up an intelligence case on a social media account they don't like for conservative or pro-life ideas and classifying it as misinformation?
So I've heard people get into that discussion. If someone is following Alex Jones or, wants to send his messages out on their website, and that's something that's worth looking into. It doesn't take much more than that and one other data point for the FBI to take a look at you. So, hopefully scruples, their belief that they're going to stick with their oath, that's really where we're at. I mean, that's the final line right there.
Kyle Seraphin, thanks for speaking out, and to your fellow whistleblowers for doing the right thing. I knew you guys were out there. I appreciate it.
There you go. Harassment and arrest by algorithm. Let's unwrap what you just saw in those 2 segments. Tucker sarcasm, pretty interesting, but sometimes he laughs at some serious issues that I don't think we should be laughing about. How many of you knew the story about Elon Musk and Babylon Bee? That was enlightening. I enjoyed hearing about that. And that would kind of prove that maybe Musk is doing this for the right reasons. Myself, I'll sit back and wait to see what happens. They restored my account I had for the longest time after he announced he was going to buy it. So we'll see how that goes. We'll play that by, like I said, but the most important part of all this is the algorithms. And we're going to get into that deeper and deeper tonight, because this is what your threat is to this. Like the FBI agent said, some agents are concerned. I really don't know. He's claiming they are. He could just be another plant that the FBI threw out there saying, go out there, be a whistleblower, take the heat off us. We don't know. I don't know him. I'm not ready to give him any benefit of the doubt now, because we're really moving into some serious times when it comes to this technology being weaponized against us. Reasonable right to privacy is not just the First Amendment. Speaking out against the government support, they're pushing this to a new narrative. So we also got, I don't know. I think we just go to play a little more. So play a little more for you, because the federal government, its agencies like the FBI, it's their job to defend the Constitution, or is it? Including the Second Amendment. I'm playing these abbreviated segments from the left's freak out over a sense of not being able to have censorship. Roll this one and we'll discuss a little more of that.
And if your job was to defend freedom of the press, and it is the job of journalists to defend freedom of the press because they rely on it, you'd think you'd be pretty excited about this. Oh, but they're not excited. Instead, journalists are panicked by this development. Watch.
I think he's a jerk. I think that he's cavalier. I think there's something dangerous when the richest guy in the world controls one of the most important political social platforms in the world. I think just as a guy who ran a business, you come in business and to fire the people before you even sit down with them just shows a cavalier recklessness. He reminds me of a Bond villain. As I said, when the richest guy in the world buys a social media platform, it's just not a good equation. I think he's a dangerous fella.
It's scary when rich people own media companies, says Donnie Deutsch, who inherited a media company from his own rich father. No one at MSNBC means it. How do you know that? Because they're not complaining about, say, MSNBC's corporate owners, its billionaire owners at Comcast. They're not upset about the fact that Jeff Bezos, probably the second richest man in the world, owns the hometown newspaper of the government, the Washington Post. The Washington Post, owned by another billionaire, just published a tweet telling users how they can crush Twitter now that Elon Musk owns it. Quote, if you do only one thing, the Post wrote, lock down your ad settings on Twitter. Starve them out. Taylor Lorenz, one of their most famous and thoroughly ridiculous reporters, had a particularly rough night. Quote, it's like the gates of hell opened on the site tonight, she wrote. The gates of hell. People in the media, you may have noticed, spend their entire lives online. No, the gates of hell open when we run out of diesel fuel and the airlines don't work and people freeze to death. The gates of hell don't open when people get to say what they want on social media. Sorry. But until last night, Twitter protected her and many journalists like her from any criticism whatsoever. Here was Vijaya Gadde, who is the chief censor at Twitter, the head lawyer, explaining why Twitter bans anyone who mocks journalists, because it's dangerous to mock journalists. Watch.
We were trying to understand the context of what was going on and take action on them. Because again, I don't know, Joe, if you've ever been the target of a dogpiling event on Twitter, but it is not particularly fun when thousands of people or hundreds of people are tweeting at you and saying things. And that's can be viewed as a form of harassment. It's not about the individual tweet. It is about the volume of things that are being directed at you.
I understand.
And so in that particular case, we made the judgment call, and it is a judgment call, to take down the tweets that were responding directly to these journalists that were saying learn to code, even if they didn't have a wish of harm specifically attached to them because of what we viewed as coordinated attempt to harass them.
See how this works? So when you're a journalist, you can destroy people's lives in this country on behalf of a political party. You can totally crush them, get them fired from their jobs, attack them to the point they literally lose custody of their children, which is happening now. You can do whatever you want if you're a journalist, but if anyone criticizes you, they have to be shut down because their criticism is violence. Only the powerful benefit from censorship. So the propagandists had protection from Twitter. That's the point. And they've lost it. And blogs like The Verge are very upset. The Verge just published a profanity-laced screed that included this amazing line, quote, most people do not want to participate in horrible, unmoderated internet spaces. Also, everyone crying about free speech conveniently ignores that the biggest threat to free speech in America is the effing government. Okay, well, that's true, but it's also a lie by omission. Because, in fact, Twitter was acting on behalf of the government. That we know for a fact that Twitter censored political views at the behest of the White House and also at the behest of Pfizer. So the biggest company in the world, the biggest government in the world, get together and tell less powerful people they can't talk. And that's what the media are defending right now. Joe Cirincione, a, quote, NatSec expert, member on the thoroughly discredited Council on Foreign Relations, wrote this last night, for example. Quote, I now approach every tweet as if it could be my last. Ooh, the self-dramatization of these people. They're such drama queens. Democratic Party lawyer Mark Elias was hysterical as well. Quote, I am here until he kicks me off. The thing is, Mark Elias isn't going to be kicked off Twitter now. We don't want him to be, by the way. We think everyone should be able to speak, period, because that's the basis of a free country. When you don't have that, you have totalitarianism, and only people who are benefiting from it support it. The whole point of the transaction is to make certain that everyone can talk. That's why Elon Musk did this. The point is to stop censoring all people, period. As the popular account Comfortably Smug put it, quote, we're celebrating because we're free to say what we want. That's what they took from us, and that's why they're terrified now. Exactly. So the people who've always been able to say whatever they want are upset not because their right to speech is under threat, because you now have the right to speech. Restoring free speech is the main reason that Elon Musk fired Parag Agrawal. That would be the head of Twitter, the loathsome head of Twitter, who went on the record in 2020 saying his goal was to block people from saying what they believe to be true. Watch.
Our role is not to be bound by the First Amendment, but our role is to serve a healthy public conversation. And our moves are reflective of things that we believe lead to a healthier public conversation. The kinds of things that we do to what about this is to focus less on thinking about free speech, but thinking about how the times have changed. One of the changes today that we see is speech is easy on the internet. Most people can speak. Where our role is particularly emphasized is who can be heard.
So free speech isn't just a prerequisite for freedom, of course. It's not simply the first right guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. It's our civic religion. It's what America is. Without free speech, it's not America, period. So here you have a guy who comes to America, clearly a smart guy, does very well here, good for him, made like $42 million last year, great. And within a few years of getting here, decides to overturn our civic religion, and nobody says anything about it. Be gone. Censoring people before you even knew you were censored. This is called shadow banning. Using algorithms to suppress information, like the New York Post's accurate reporting on Hunter Biden's laptop. They did a lot of that, remember?
One of the things I'm most excited about in our efforts is to switch to proactive enforcement. I think that for too long we relied on people reporting things to us, and I'm sorry about your experience and the reports that you get. I can't address those specific ones, but I do think enabling Twitter to be more proactive and actually identify this content to the extent that we can is going to make a big difference for people so that we can take action on this content before it even gets seen.
Yeah. So we can censor you before you even know you've been censored. And we're so confident in our total power over you that we can brag about it on TV. Now, that woman and her boss and a lot of other people at Twitter, the enemies of free expression, the enemies of freedom itself, they're all gone. Walking down the road, talking their lunchboxes. This is a huge deal. It's hard to overstate how transformative this could be. The activist left believed it owned Twitter and the public conversation in this country more broadly. Why do they think that? Because for many years they have owned it. They had a monopoly, and that monopoly has been broken. Once everyone can talk, rich or powerful, poor or powerless, doesn't matter. When everyone can talk, nothing will ever be the same. And the Democratic Party will be forced to defend its positions on their merits. Thanks so much.
There you go. What should come back to? Oh, the Constitution again. Oh my God. It always seems to be about an attack on the Constitution. Controlling what artificial intelligence is doing. Algorithms, big pharma. Now, we're going to roll this up all for you at the end of this segment, but let's just take a look at what you said there. And we're going to go even deeper into it in parts 2 and 3. But the liberals are freaking out for not being able to censor people. I thought liberals were open-minded for everybody to live the way they want, speak the way they want. Well, that doesn't sound too liberal to me. And who are these people? Get a kick out of them with the gates of hell running out. Tucker nailed that one with freezing to death and starvation is more vital than you want to see the gates of hell. Watch when that starts happening. Defending your actions is a threat to tyranny. Democrats and Biden administration and their policies are destroying our nation and its future. They get the quote from the CFR. The CFR, why are they still around? We've been trying to point out the object of the CFR to destroy the U.S. and our sovereignty for years now. Why isn't anybody listening? Oh, because you'll never hear anything on on mainstream media. That's why we have social media, to bring you the truth of what their objective really is. And then we have this guy, Prague, Tucker Carlson is being a smart man. Well, according to this, Prague shouldn't be a smart man. He shouldn't be leaving with $42 million. He should be arrested, tried for coming into our country and censoring us. And whoever brought him in should be held accountable too. Other assets should be frozen. You want to play ball? Let's play ball. Because what's happening now is no joke. And you'll see that in parts 2 and 3. What else do we have here? And these people are they're getting censored for them assuming from what you're posting. Because a lot of people get on social media, they post like they're talking to their friends. That's what the whole idea was. Does that mean you're going to go out and commit a crime? They're going to assume you're committing a crime. They've already got you convicted of a crime without you even doing it. AI, social media giants, wrong. I tell you, this is the most important one. But let's move on and let's hear from Amit Dillon, constitutional rights attorney on the First Amendment, why Twitter is so important to oppose and counter what's taking place from the other communist-controlled platforms. Roll that.
Much for coming on. You've devoted your entire life to defending free speech in the courts, and bless you for that. You're one of the very few who still does it. Does this seem like a big deal to you?
Well, it's a huge deal, Tucker, and I'm very excited. Now, Elon Musk, like you said, is taking a big risk by doing this. He's putting a target on his back. He's already done that. And, you know, my perspective has been that Twitter is so important to the public discourse here. I've actually sued Twitter on 2 occasions for 2 people with radically different political views, but both of whom were censored. Many of our other clients have been censored. You mentioned Project Veritas. Tulsi Gabbard is shadow banned, so many of us. And so I love the First Amendment and happy to see that the new owner of Twitter does as well. And I think that some of the things that he needs to do to immediately restore confidence in the value of this platform is, like he said, to open up the algorithms, to stop the shadow banning, to really open up and publish the records of all attempts by governments, by private corporations,
Yes.
by politicians to ask for censorship. We should all know what happened, and transparency is the first step to resolving the public trust in this very important platform. So even though I'm suing, I would love to see these improvements be made. And all of the noises he's making so far, yesterday's terminations of the most egregious anti-speech executives at Twitter, is a major first step. And now I hope Elon Musk hires the right people. People are policy. It's going to be very important for him to make sure that the new leaders of Twitter discard all of these bad old policies. And then I think, it is a absolutely open horizon for free speech on the internet now.
And tell us exactly when and how government colluded with social media platforms to squelch political speech. You make such a smart point in saying that. I wish I'd thought of that myself, but I hope that they will do that. We have an absolute right to know. Because that is, just really quickly, that is like a clear violation of the First Amendment, is it not?
I believe so, and that's what our lawsuits have been alleging. So far, courts haven't gone there. They need to. So the lawsuits are ongoing. I hope we can, move past them and speak freely.
Amen.
Already serious concerns, folks, that China uses TikTok as a Trojan horse to spy on American citizens. But now the social media giant has a new trick up its sleeve. TikTok is building a massive digital shopping mall. But here's the catch. It's all built on the back of your data. Joining me now is a friend of the show, cybersecurity expert Morgan Wright. Morgan, how does TikTok pull this off, this data aggregation on a mass scale, and what are the implications for the users of the app?
They pulled it off with the consent of the American public, who doesn't understand what's going on behind the scenes. And when you look at the number of times it's been downloaded, Dan, the number of times it's been used, And this is a self-inflicted social media wound, a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and people are willing to give up their information for this little bit of virality, this little bit of dopamine hit, looking at videos. They don't realize at the end of the day, they've been manipulated so badly. They think they're going one direction, but by the time they get done, they've been taken in an entirely different direction by little degrees, things you don't notice on a day-to-day basis, but over a week, over a month, I can fundamentally change how you think about a topic by changing the algorithm that feeds you information. And all that time, like you say, Dan, you're giving me more and more data, which then I refine and use it against you once again.
It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the first session today, the panel discussion today. Melissa Chan is an independent journalist with the Global Reporting Center with wide experience in China, formerly based in China. So Melissa, over to you.
Welcome everyone to the panel, and our title is How AI is Powering China's Domestic Surveillance State, and we have a fantastic group of panelists to discuss this.
A Chinese company is reportedly making surveillance cameras that can detect a person's ethnicity and whether they're part of certain minority groups, like Uyghurs and Tibetans. And NDT's Sean Marshall has more details.
Chinese CCTV, or closed-circuit television, has taken racial profiling to a new level. 4 types of surveillance cameras have the capability to identify race, skin color, Uyghur and Tibetan faces. According to a U.S. video surveillance research organization, Internet Protocol Video Market, or IPVM, reports that these cameras are made by Dahua Technology. See, IPVM says that the surveillance cameras can identify Uyghurs from within a crowd and issue Uyghur warnings to Chinese police, helping them to arrest Uyghurs quickly. This is the online police model touted by Dahua Technology to enhance the police's prediction, early warning, and prevention capabilities. In China, security cameras are everywhere you could imagine, even in company restrooms. Estimates put the number of security cameras in China somewhere between 500 and 700 million. Recently, Dahua Technology admitted to IPVM that the 4-camera product web pages did exist. But they declared that it was deeply troubled and concerned that the camera's appearance on its own website had already launched an investigation. In October 2019, Dahua Technology was placed on the sanction list by the U.S. Department of Commerce. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
The British government is being sued over a human rights violation in China. Exiled Uyghurs say the UK failed to investigate imports of cotton products allegedly linked to forced labor camps. The camps are said to target Uyghurs in China's Xinjiang region, also known as East Turkestan. The World Uyghur Congress warns there is a high risk that cotton products sourced from some Chinese businesses by UK companies could be produced by prison or forced labor.
We are challenging the UK custom authorities for their failure to address the import of cotton products coming specifically from our region, the Uyghur region that we refer to as East Turkestan. All governments around the world have an obligation to prevent their complicity in atrocity crimes around the world, and forced labor is definitely one. And this is why we're here today, to challenge the UK government and custom authorities.
The Munich-based non-governmental organisation says factory labourers in Xinjiang are subjected to detention and coercion. Its lawyer accuses the UK government of declining to engage in evidence collected since 2020. But the government's lawyers said it was a hypothetical case based on generalised evidence, with the National Crime Agency concluding there was insufficient material to develop a criminal investigation.
Well, have we got your attention yet? Because what you're looking at that end, that segment, was the future for your children and your grandchildren if you don't wake up and take a stand now. Like I said, and this is what you need to stand up for, no matter what your political persuasion is, no matter what you do personally on your own time, it doesn't matter. Without this, you'll do none of it. There'll be nothing for you. So let's unravel a lot of that it will bring the segment to a close. Hami Dillon, did you hear what you said at the beginning of her segment about how Elon Musk put a target on his back? That's an interesting statement, because how did he put that target on her back? Is it going to be financially that we're going after him, or will it be physically? Will he be out for physical harm? Well, stay tuned to the show for our segment in part 3. And you're going to find some information to help you answer that question. Now, we've got Musk, yep, he put the target, Communist China. I got a question for everybody here. How come nobody in the mainstream media uses the word Communist China? They just use China. Communist is the main part of China. The basic people in China are probably good people. Their problem is communism. They'll never have the opportunities that any of us have because they don't have this. This is why they're coming at it all. We'll have to see what happens to the people in Brazil for their choice, because they're pushing in there and we're already feeling the pain that they're inflicting here. Let's call it what it is. You know, now let's move to how Musk exposed what's going on. We want to know what algorithms they were using. If he exposes that, then I'll put a little more faith in what Elon's actually doing, and if he's going to follow through. Because that, whatever algorithm setups they're using, can tell us a lot, a real lot, and it might find out who's behind a lot of this controlling the narrative. Because like I said, the damage has been done. We're going to have to take a while to recover from what just took place. As far as the elections go, straight GOP. We'll give them a chance. Because if not, the other alternatives, no one's going to like. But our founders put it in here to give us that last check on the checks and balances. So the other segment we saw is the part about TikTok. How is the ability to manipulate, see what you hear. And what that does is, he's absolutely correct. It shapes what you think. Ever talk to somebody and try to explain something? Isn't that have a concept? And they just don't get it. They can't even see beyond their own nose. See all the sweatshops in China? Ever try to talk to these people today where they're sitting there? I saw it last week. There was a rally for it was the unions, and all I saw up on stage was Democrat candidates. The union, no matter what union you're in, most of them are all under the AFL-CIO. Do they really believe that voting for Democrats right now, or kowtowing to communist China, is going to benefit them in the near future? In the long-term future, it's devastating. Because you're not going to be able to sit there and go on strike in China. Try it. Watch what happens. What do you think this whole thing with the Uyghurs is all about? People better wake up. And interestingly enough, we showed you a little blip of what we're going to cover in segment 2. It's going to be an interesting discussion on communist Chinese artificial intelligence and its threat. It's going to be from the Hoover Institute. And this took place on September 29th, 2020, just a month before the 2020 election. That you will find interesting, and you should definitely watch it. We're going to break it down and abbreviate it for you because it's long. The other one is, the British government suing over the purchase of goods made by slave labor. And slave labor. Everything this left and these control freaks that want to control the narrative have been complaining about. Americans are slave traders. Everybody's a racist. Rah, rah, rah. That's all bullshit. Tucker called it at the beginning. He says they don't care. It's all about them and their control and power. See, the most important in the First Amendment allows free speech in order to keep people informed enough to stop tyranny. So when the purchase of Twitter came out, excuse me a second. So when the importance of the Twitter thing, and the news came out, everybody freaked out. Like I said, why though? Why? Because Twitter was an arm for the government, the federal agencies. Why wasn't anybody in the federal agency telling Congress, screaming out loud to the public, telling you, hey, they're violating your Constitution? Well, that tells me that these federal agencies aren't defending our Constitution. Let's get right down to it. Why are we even funding them? If the GOP takes over, they need to cut off funding these agencies. The elephant in the room, really empowering them all, even more than ever before, was that 9/11 thing and the Unpatriot Act. That needs to go instantly. We'll see what they do. Okay. So what else have we got here? We got, why is the Biden administration ignoring what the communists are doing with AI? And so many other things to become the world's dominant power. Could it be the Democrats want them to become the dominant power? More control? Do they actually think that they're going to have any standing when someone like Xi Jinping, we played you this information last week, he's emperor. He's a dictator. He wants to take over and he doesn't care how he does it. So why are these agencies even working with the communist Chinese? Major word, communist. Are they, is this intentional? Do they want to destroy our country and leave the rest of the free world vulnerable? That's something you better start thinking about. So the real question is our government right now being controlled by powerful outside forces? If so, why isn't the military and law enforcement stepping up to protect our nation's values? If they don't, who will? Everybody's running around thanking everybody, but it's going to come to a time where you're going to wonder why you thank some people, because I think some of them have already sold out. They're going to sell out to protect themselves, and everybody had an excuse, just like in Nazi Germany. So stay tuned, because we're going to explain more in parts 2, so you can answer these questions for yourself instead of just me telling you, because intellectual people, I can tell you whatever they want. You don't have to believe me. But if you feed enough people enough information, they may sooner or later get it. With that, we're going to end part 1.